Good day, students. Welcome to this THF 1501 lecture based on packaging and concealment of contemporary sculptures. This lecture is presented by Karawa Apane. In this lecture, we'll be looking at the concept of concealment and packaging in sculpture, but basically and generally in art. I will look at how that just forces us to sort of deconstruct the meanings of either artworks or sculptures. We look at the deeper meaning of that is concealed in the artwork that the artist is really trying to give to us, right? We'll look at different kinds of artwork, including painting, as this will also help us understand the concept that we are discussing. We'll also be looking at and discussing the works of Inga Shonibare, Scramble for Africa. I'll also look at Jeff Koons, The Rabbit, and then we'll look at other works like, for example, pop artists like Andy Warhol. And I think the first thing that I want us to look at is what does it actually mean for when they say concealment or packaging. So what it means is artists would package their work in a way that requires one to think more, to get deeper into the artwork, try to understand the meanings. So what it uses science and metaphors. For example, if we look at the images in this page, you will see that there are two different images actually depicting two different ideas. The first one is Yenga Shonibare, in which his work actually questions the clothing or African clothing print, and in this artwork actually you can see there's more elements for us to actually look at. First of all, there's a bunch of people who are wearing African prints without heads, and again these people actually look more white. So the work itself questions how the African print has been imposed on us by Europeans. And I think it was 1845 Berlin Conference. So then this is basically the sort of the meeting in which the Europeans were discussing how to formalize Africa, how to impose certain things, how to, for example, maybe divide Africa, maybe give them sort of things that we think we own today, but basically was imposed on us, right? And the second one is the Mona Lisa. When you look at Mona Lisa, it's a very famous painting, but there's so many things involved in a Mona Lisa smile painting. There's a smile, but if you look into the eyes, there is also a deeper content. There is basically behind the smile, there's pain, there's worries, there's scars and everything. So Mona Lisa itself represents the concept, the issue of women, that women has to always give us the smile, give us be happy, look happy, even when things are not really going well in a sort of a family, or maybe the relationship, or whatever it is that they're going through. But they eventually just keep giving us a sort of a smile, the sort of happiness. They are always forced to put a happy face. That's basically the meaning behind, or the concealed meaning for me of Mona Lisa, and the concealed meaning behind the sculptures of Yenga Shonibare would be that the clothing were actually imposed on us. The same clothing that we think are African, but they were actually imposed on us. and those are the things that we take to heart. The prints, the colors, we feel more African while we're wearing them, but at the end of the day, they don't really represent us as much as we think they do. So those are, for me, how the meaning are concealed. Those are the meanings that are concealed in the artworks. I would also just look at other terms when we talk about concealing and meaning. For example, this sort of artworks uses, in general, art uses metaphors, so most of the times, and uses sort of signs and signifiers. So, for example, when if we go back to the images we just saw, there's a smile from Mona Lisa, but the eyes themselves are giving us the sort of a deeper into the soul, which presents a different thing to look at, to read. In the sculptures from Yinka Shonibari, we look at we see that the figures in the sculptures don't have heads, so that could be considered as a sort of a metaphor for us to actually deconstruct, to understand what it means. Another thing is that we can look at as the signs and signals. What are the signs? What are the signs that this artwork is based on? What on a certain thing, or what are the headless figures signify, and why are they white headless figures? Another thing would be, why are they wearing African prints? So there's many things to deconstruct it. So metaphor, it's a linguistic and visual symbols that you find in either poetry, art, or any sort of work that requires extensive interpretation. So those are the things that are used in the ideas of concealing meaning in when we package our artworks. So we think about so many things. We think about what are the things what are the visual clues that we're gonna give to our audience to say, okay, think about this. Remember the Berlin conference of this date, right? So remember. And they will remember that, look at the round table. What does normally the round table would be when people are discussing a serious matter. So the round table itself, it's a sort of a sign that signifies a certain important discussion, right? And then what else can we look at? We look at their clothing themselves. Why are they wearing these things? Who are they representing? Or these people are to be representing Africa. So it could be that the round table they're discussing Africa. So there's more meaning to be deconstructed. The meaning is that using metaphors and signs signifies as well. So that this concept of art requires the use of that type of ideas. You must put in signs, signifies, metaphors for us to actually start thinking more about those things. Below there are more pictures of general pictures of how meanings are concealed and metaphors are used in art. Just normal pictures of art. As I have mentioned, we'll be discussing a little bit of Yinka Shonibari's work. So as I've already discussed earlier, that Yinka Shonibari's work, it's basically, especially the one that I've chosen, it's just questions the the African prints themselves. This for me, this is a very strong work. You actually just have to use your thinking when you look at the work. Like I said, there's the table, the people in the figures, not necessarily the people, the figures in the sculptures themselves require look very serious. And another thing is that what makes it even more stronger in terms of the metaphorical behavior of the sculptures is that they look very serious, but we hardly even see the faces. We don't actually see the faces, but we can see the postures. The postures themselves tells us that tells us that these people are really serious and they're discussing very serious matter, which in this sense probably is Africa. So the fact that the artist was able to actually give us a sort of a strong a sense of the seriousness of the paint. I mean of the sculptures without using faces, because we know that normally faces are the things that give us shows us the seriousness of the situations. For example, it could be in the eyes, it could be in the tones, it could be in the facial expressions, but here it's in the posture expressions. So the way the artist is sitting, the way not the artist, the people, the figures are sitting, their hand gestures, the pointing, and some of them are holding each other's shoulders. It's like sort of an agreement. So there's so many elements which I've discussed earlier, metaphors and signs, signifying that there are agreements, there are discussions about a very important issue, which in the sense is Africa. So another thing, like I've mentioned, that the figures are addressed in a sort of African print. So what we know today as to be African prints, actually. So you can try to understand that as much as we can say this is African prints. I don't think during this conference, the figures or the people who were discussing this issue were wearing African prints. This now becomes a metaphor to say these prints are not ours. These colors that we are proud of today, that we think that they are ours, they are not. They are basically just they own these things. We just they were imposed on us, so we just think that they are ours, but generally they are not. Yes, I think that's what he used in the work as a sort of a metaphor. The next couple of slides will actually look at the same works that Yinka Shonibare was dealing with. Like I said, it's very important to use signs and signifiers when dealing with such things as packaging and concealment. So I'm looking at this work, Waka was Jacko by Jeff Koons, right? So for me, this is a very strong concept because it's a bit. I would consider it to be a little bit political because we know monkeys and considered more where black people were considered in that manner, and we also know that Michael Jackson has had a plastic surgery to look more white, and we know the reasons behind it. But I feel like this was a play, and that's the most interesting thing about Jeff Koons' work is that they're very playful. They play, and I think that's how he get away with a lot of things. just for example, you can think of the rabbit as well. I mean, it was a bit confusing. At the same time, apparently, it could very revolutionary artwork. So even in with this one, he gets very playful with it. He gets very. We know how iconic was Michael Jackson, but at the same time, he had his own issues. Maybe it's color issues. So it's very controversial to have to put a monkey, him carrying a monkey, and we know he was very save the animals kind of person. He was a very controversial person, and at the same time, I felt Jeff Koons used that to his advantage, that to be very controversial when it comes to Michael Jackson, and those are the things that I'm looking at. I'm looking at the fact that Michael Jackson was used plastic surgery to look white. I'm looking at the idea that the monkey itself is a weight that was used to consider black people were considered monkeys. So I'm looking at the fact that Michael Jackson was very iconic, and he cared more about animals, animal lives. He cared more about children. So there's so many things that comes to mind when you look at it, and at the same time it becomes a bit playful in a sense that it takes away the strong meaning of it, but at the same time the meaning it's still there. It doesn't necessarily take it away, but it just conceals it in so many elements of the sculpture. So it goes back to the whole concept of saying that the meaning. I mean, when packaging the whole finished artwork, one needs to consider what are the elements that are going to sell it, what are the elements that are going to give people ideas that this is more about this. So if for example, Michael Jackson was just had the whole picture was I mean the whole sculpture was Michael Jackson, and then the head was a monkey. Would have been obvious what he was trying to say, but now he's carrying a monkey. He's holding the monkey, and then he is iconically in his iconic color, like gold, because normally his DVDs would be a gold color, and at the same time we know that he's run gold so many times. His album was so there's a lot to pick out. He's got a white hair. I mean, we know Michael Jackson, that's his hair, but he's got a white hair. We also know that Michael Jackson was black, and the monkeys, as I said, were used to refer to a black person. So you can either say Jeff Koons was complaining about Michael Jackson actually not being white rather than being black, or you can say that you're still a monkey even if you look lighter than the rest of them. So there's a lot. There's just so many things that you can take out of it, and I think this work is very strong and very powerful to look at and to try to understand what actually is going on in the sculpture. Thank you. I think also there is a bunch of other sculptures that I put in the slides to just give you an idea of what this is, from what this thing means, what this concept means from Jeff Koons. So just go through them and try to understand. You can also go online and just check other works of Jeff Koons, and I think, like I said, it's very playful. You'll find that sometimes it's very sexual, sometimes playful, sometimes childish. So he himself is a very controversial sculpture artist.